I think my parents were a bit worried when I started getting checks in the mail as a 13-year-old. I think we say every day at the office we really should film a sitcom.
Are you actually chasing ambulances?
I don't want to be the last adopter. I don't want to necessarily be one of the first adopters either.
Which is pretty insane.
We almost came undone because we were hiring too quickly. Stories like that, being able to be there and be part of, that's just, I don't know, that's what makes me love practicing law.
Welcome to the File Notes podcast. I'm your host, Sophie Svensson, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's episode with Joshua Reimer. Joshua is the managing director and founder of Johnson Reimer Lawyers. From his early days as an ambulance chaser, personal injury lawyer in San Francisco, to building one of Australia's leading victims of crimes teams, Joshua's journey is nothing short of inspiring. In just 8 years, his firm skyrocketed to a team of 50, a testament to his strategic leadership and innovative approach. But rapid growth often comes with its own set of challenges. And in our discussion, we delve into Joshua's unique insights on navigating these hurdles, from a human capital perspective to harnessing technology, including the strategic decision to adopt cloud-based systems right from the very start. So welcome to the podcast, Joshua. I'm going to crack straight into it, as you have quite an interesting upbringing, and ask you to tell me what it was like for you growing up, perhaps starting from when you sold your first business at 15 years old for $10,000, up until when you became an ambulance chaser, personal injury lawyer in San Francisco.
Thanks, Sophie. Great to be on the show. Yeah, look, it's been a wild time. I've done things the hard way always. I grew up in Canada and Australia. Between the two, my mum and dad are, my mum's from Australia, my dad's from Canada, so I've been split between the two countries growing up. But yeah, I set up back in the 90s. I guess I've always been a bit entrepreneurial. When I was a kid, I set up a web business setting up a web network of sites. And I think my parents were a bit worried when I started getting checks in the mail as a 13-year-old, wondering where this was coming from, and then selling that business when I was 16 and moving on to other things. Always had entrepreneurial projects on the go, from washing all the neighbors' cars through to who knows what. But always had something on the go. Set up a retail business in my 20s as well, before I made the shift into law. Yeah, and as you say, ended up doing law the complicated way, getting a law degree in California, and chasing ambulance in the San Francisco Bay Area for a while, which was a great start to law. Yeah.
So how did you end up actually studying law, especially given your entrepreneurial background? One would think you might lean more towards a business avenue.
Yeah, I think I'd always wanted to do something practical in the people side of, not just a pure business side of things. I've always had the business bent, but I've always had a keen interest in trying to help people, work with people. And I think probably what really sparked it, I ended up being on a 3-week murder trial as a jury member. And yeah, I got elected the foreman of the jury and spent 3 weeks doing that. And that was a real eye-opening experience. And I thought, wow, this is really awesome. And started a bit of a journey after that. Took a few years, but eventually decided to get into studying law. And yeah, thought I'd try that side of things out.
Yeah, jury service is an interesting one. I think anyone that's had a slight interest in law or studying law, it would be such an interesting opportunity. But for everyone else, it's, I want to get out of jury duty as much as possible.
Absolutely. And now I can't go do it, but it was a great experience at the time to see the other side of it.
And I have to ask, as a personal injury lawyer in America, are you actually chasing ambulances?
Not literally. It's the great stereotype from movies, I suppose. But no, we're not actually chasing ambulances, but they're, I guess, not too far after sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I always see when you're driving on roads in America, the massive billboards for all the personal injury lawyers. It's fascinating.
Look, I was a junior at the time. I never quite got to the point of having my smiling face up on a billboard beside the freeway. So I missed out on that.
Yeah. And what were the main differences you found between working in the States and then working in Australia?
Look, I suppose one of the differences is in injuries law in America, you can work on a contingency fee basis, and that's what they all worked to, where you take a percentage of the winnings, whatever the winnings were. Very different dynamic, where inevitably 33% of whatever you settle for the client comes in fees. We could go back and forth arguing the positives and negatives. It creates some access to justice, I suppose, in that whatever the lawyer can get on the table, they get paid from. And at the same time, it can create some very opportunistic situations where you have lawyers that are filing claims for all types of things that probably aren't really claims, just to try to get some go away money and a quick settlement on the table. And you don't have to file a proper basis certificate like we do over here. So you don't necessarily have to verify as a lawyer that there's a so you see all types of things over there, which make it look, there's positives to that contingency fee based billing, and also some drawbacks as well.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Your career trajectory kind of changed at one point in time. You met your wife and you decided to re-qualify to practice in Australia. Can you tell me how your career trajectory kind of changed and what that whole process was like?
Yeah, well, my wife is Australian, and I think when I made the decision not to go back overseas, that sort of changed the trajectory of my career. I didn't have a set job to go to here until after I'd decided not to go back to the States. I got contacted about a possible role working as a clerk while I requalified, and completely changed that whole path, where I ended up working locally here in Melbourne and found a job working some general practice, wills and estates and all those different types of things, and then working in victims of crime, which was a whole area that I didn't even know existed back at the time.
Yeah. Can you share how the victims of crime scheme works in Australia for people outside of Australia or potentially outside of Victoria? Because I know that they differ.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so in Victoria, there's a scheme set up that's run through the Magistrates Court that provides some practical helps to people who've been the victim of a crime. So counselling costs, security expenses, loss of earnings, some financial assistance as well. Really practical types of things. Inevitably, it does mean if there's been, anything from an armed robbery or an aggravated burglary through to if there's been a homicide and you have to sit down with the family and try to organise funeral expenses for the funeral next week. How's that going to get paid? Get them all organised for counselling and some real practical sides of it. Yeah, it's designed to be a bit of a safety net for people who've been the victim of a crime, and also some recognition through the court system, where often the court system is all about the offender and the wrongdoer, where the victim can actually have a forum if they want it, to have a hearing and be recognized in the court as a victim. That can be pretty powerful for some people as well.
And are there any unique challenges in that area of practice? I imagine that working with victims of crime must require quite a unique blend of legal expertise and empathy.
We do sometimes joke in the office that we're 1/3 lawyer, 1/3 counselor, 1/3 social worker some days, because we have to mix all those different things. Obviously, we've got social workers and counselors that we work with and we refer clients out to, but you do have to mix those real delicate people skills. People have been through some pretty horrific stuff, and you're there trying to help them pick up the pieces. And sometimes we can obtain practical helps through the tribunal, but it's also somebody being in their corner and knowing that they've got somebody who's going to bat for them that can be a huge part of that recovery process as well after what's happened. Absolutely, that people mix. It's also a very skinny by way of funding as far as how it's set up. It's all a government funded scheme, and we're very thankful and grateful that there is funding there, but it is, despite having to run with a client file for 6 months, 18 months, it can be a long process, and but at the same time we have to run it in a very efficient way while still making the client feel heard and provide them with that support and that real people empathy while running it very efficiently. It's a real challenge.
Yeah, I imagine the way you hire would be very particular to try to get the right balance of people that you're bringing in.
those two skill sets, efficiency and really good file skills, and people and empathy and compassion and those skills don't often come together in a hiring process. It's a really unique combo that you've got to try to find.
Yeah. So this actually gets to the part that I was really excited to talk to you about, which is how you started your own firm, Joshua Reimers, and grew that firm to 45 employees in just 8 years, which is pretty insane.
It has been crazy. Yeah.
Can you share what type of law you primarily focus on broadly?
Yeah, I think we like to say we do people law. Yes, we do victims of crime. We've got a good team, 12 or 13 staff doing that area of law. But we've also got a whole gamut of other people law. We've got a large team doing family law. We've got a team doing wills and estates, personal injuries, so TAC and work cover, and some property law, because it seems like a lot of things come back to property, and criminal law as well. Real people law areas, real mum and dad kind of clients. We don't act for BHP bulletins and all the stuff in suits and all those types of things. It's all mum and dad kind of clients, real, yeah, just helping people through whatever the crisis happens to be at the time.
And for your staff, if you were to split their day up, how would that look in terms of the work that they'd be doing?
Absolutely. Look, it's a real mix of people work. There's a lot of time on the phone. Our team are on the phone. I think we would have said before COVID, they're in the meeting room seeing clients all the time. These days, it's probably a lot more on Zoom or Teams or on the phone than it used to be. We have clients all over Victoria now, and so that actually has opened things up for us. It's not all just based in the meeting room, but a lot of that, and then trying to block off time for the actual file work and actually being able to power through the, when you're in family law, all the different areas, you've got litigation as well. So you've got to work a litigation file as well as talking to clients and keeping the people side going as well.
Do you find that the victims of crime practice area, is that a lot more in person than online phone calls, or
a lot more these days? So it used to be in-person meetings for everything. These days it's shifted. Post-COVID, it's much more convenient for people. We offer them the in-person appointments. We've got offices around Victoria, around Melbourne, but most people these days elect for a phone consult. And so often, yeah, the lawyers on that team, if they've got a day doing intakes, they might be seeing 5 or 6 clients, most of them virtually. And it can be really intense when you're dealing with one story of tragedy after another in a day. And yeah, so that focus on mental being, and we've had to really focus and invest in the employee assistance program side of things, and really trying to make sure we're aware of that mental well-being, because when you're dealing with one after the other, it can be quite intense.
Definitely. And I imagine if these meetings are online, I feel like you miss a lot of the small pleasantry, get to know each other kind of chats that you do in a real life meeting. And so you're probably going through a lot more meetings, which is good for efficiency, but in terms of your well-being, it's
100%. I much prefer to have an in-person meeting with the client if I can, because the client gets to know you. They know who is acting for them. You're not just some faceless person off in an office somewhere. They actually have met you and built a rapport and know who it is that's going to bat for them with their claim. So I much prefer trying to meet in person wherever possible. But these days, post-COVID, clients like that flexibility, and it does help the client if we can avoid them having to take half a day off work to come into the office as well.
Yeah, I find it so easy to disconnect when you're on calls, because I think if you grow up watching TV or YouTube or something like that, it's just one-way communication. But then sometimes you're just on a call and then you forget that it's actually a conversation because you're not getting all the other signals of being in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to keep that as a lawyer, when you're talking to client after client, really keeping that these are real people that have been through real traumas, and trying to keep that empathy while you're just talking through a phone or on video calls all day. It can be tough. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so being a good lawyer is what most people are trained to do. However, something that's not so talked about at law school is actually the business of law. And it's something you more so get introduced to once you start working at a firm. How did your experience in retail and entrepreneurship influence you in running a firm and your approach to the business of law?
Yeah, excellent question. I guess I'd probably say in some respects I'm a business person more so than a lawyer. I love the law and I love the legal side of being able to use that as a tool to help people, but I've always loved business, and so building a business around what I enjoy with law has been great. I can build a practice of being able to help people through law, and I guess being able to have some business background has helped to be able to scale that into a way that we can help more people.
Yeah, always a good end goal. And you obviously haven't had any issue in attracting clients because of the large growth that you experienced. Is there a particular approach you take to finding new clients?
As you say, we haven't had any issue with that side of things. It's definitely not been our issue. I think my business partner went to a conference many years ago where they said 80% of the lawyers chase 20% of the work. And so we've actually consciously gone the other way. We're probably part of the 20% that are chasing 80% of the work. It's just the blue oceans out there. If you're willing to take on the work that's probably a lot of other firms don't want to do. We don't have in family law or estates, we're not necessarily working with $20 million asset pools. We're working with mums and dads who just need something sorted out and pragmatically getting things. We're dealing with victims of crime, which it's not necessarily a high paying area, but if we have really good systems and processes in place, we can afford to be able to give them really good service while systematizing things. Yeah, so I guess we are working in areas where other firms probably overlook the clients that we take on, and there's been no shortage of work. I think the challenge for us has been bringing on quality staff to meet the demand, because we know that as soon as you drop the ball and provide bad service to a client or a referrer, then you stop getting those referrals.
Yeah, definitely. Could you share some insights into any of your hiring practices, particularly in training or selecting, mentoring junior staffs?
Yeah, we've typically gone with hiring juniors with some exceptions, but generally we hire junior staff who we can either straight out of law school, or often for our legal assistants, they might not have worked in law offices before. We might be hiring them straight out of working at a supermarket or at a hardware store, and this is their first office job, and we train them up from scratch. Lawyers, bringing them in as juniors straight out of law school. I guess there's two benefits or two upsides in that. A, everybody has to get their start, and we love to be able to give juniors a start. And B, we can train them the way we want them trained to be able to do law the way we like to see it done. And yeah, it gives us I think a much better ability to get over the long term a team that are doing things the way we want them done. And as a result, we've got an awesome team many of them have been with us many of them are coming up on long service leave now, which, considering we've only been around for 8.5, 9 years, I think a testament that a lot have started at that junior spot and stuck with us.
Yeah, that's really awesome to be able to give people those opportunities early on to do something that they might not have thought that they could have or would have otherwise. And how have you managed to maintain the culture and values that were important at the beginning of starting the firm to now, considering you scaled quite quickly?
Look, it hasn't been easy. We've made mistakes along the way, and we've learned by a little bit of trial and error. I think it's really been key to Paul and Alex and myself, my business partners and myself, to have a workplace where everybody can enjoy coming to work. Everybody's has bad days, but at the end of the day, we want to have a really positive, supportive workplace, and we try to only bring people into that will contribute to that in a positive way. I think the legal industry has got a terrible reputation for that side of things. Everybody works really hard. I think they have a lot of fun together, but 5:30, we try to get everybody out the door. If somebody's working back, generally you've got trial or you've got something happening, things happen and you have to work back, but generally then you see colleagues rolling up their sleeves and trying to give them a hand to help them get their job done, and so that everybody can get out the door. And really trying to foster that collaborative environment where we don't see lawyers who are always, quite often, as I said before, A-type personalities, not having that competitive against themselves to try to do their personal best, but not be cutthroat competitive internally. They're really, the team we have are really collaborative, all pulling, we're all on the same team. We're all pulling together, and it's an awesome environment in that regard. Trying to maintain and keep, that's the daily challenge.
Love that. Seems like a great culture for law firms. And so, from my understanding, you grew very quickly, and because of that, you would have had to make a lot of decisions about technology or staffing or maybe your office because you were growing so quickly. And because of that, you probably need employees who can cope with this type of fast-paced and less constant kind of environment. Are there any skills you look for when hiring staff in relation to that aspect of your business?
Look, certainly tech savvy is important. It is, we're very much not old school in how we do things. We don't have I think we've hired lawyers before who expect to have a typing pool where you can dictate to. We don't work that way. We have some amazing legal assistants, but they function more as paralegals in many respects, and that very different way of working where you're very tech savvy. You're doing a lot of your own initial polishing up of drafts, flicking things back and forth with your legal assistant, and working cloud-based. We've gone fully paperless, so there's not great big paper files. Back in the day, probably early on, we had staff standing over photocopiers. Now it's all in PDF and electronic. So yeah, high level of tech savvy is needed. Can't just rely on handwritten notes stuck in a big file that you sift through. It's all got to be done electronically these days.
Yeah, so looking back to when you first started, what was the technology that you were using across the business?
We started quite simple because it was in the early days, just Paul and I in a little tiny corner office, the two of us trying to operate on a, I think, $500 budget per month to try to keep the lights on in our little tiny corner office. We set up with Action Step as a practice management system. We had some VoIP handset phones that we waited to have ring. We were sitting there hoping that they would ring at some point in that first scary several months. Yeah, kept things really simple with Dropbox for files and all that type of thing. It was really a little bit patched together, but it worked. Yeah.
How long did it take for that first phone to ring? I imagine you would have been very excited.
It was very exciting. I think it was about it wasn't until the second month that we finally signed our first client. And then I remember when the month we first covered, I think it was about 3 months in, when we had enough payments to cover that $500 overhead in the hit. So we weren't paying ourselves yet, but we at least broke even on our expenses. It was really exciting. Yeah, it was a bit of a crazy time. And look, as I say, we've learned a lot over the years. I think there were patches we almost came undone because we were hiring too quickly. I think the year that we went from 12 staff, I think one year we went from 6 to 12 staff, and the next year we went from 12 to 24 staff. And that almost unstuck us from a cash flow point of view and all the rest of it, going from just Paul and I in the little tiny corner office to in a couple of years, it was, in retrospect, probably a little bit too. We got through it and we're still here, which is great. And I'd like to think we've established more and we've got more depth and maturity now rather than being that wild startup we probably were 8.5 years ago.
Yeah. Were there any other growth pains that you experienced at that time?
Look, cash flow was probably a huge thing in those early days, when a lot of the types of things we do, personal injuries, victims of crime, they're usually pay at the end files and they can be running for a year or two. Even family law, if you're deferred payment and taking payment at the final settlement of the file, you can have huge outstandings and be trying to pay all these staff and office expenses while you're trying to wait for those files to resolve. And I guess office space has been a constant thing. We've been just so lucky as we've grown. Neighboring offices have happened to finish their leases, and we've got more building permits to knock out more holes in the walls, and we've slowly been expanding down the street as we've been knocking out holes in the walls. So it's that side of the office space side has just kept on somehow managing to resolve as we've gone along.
quite good because it's quite a niggly one as well, I think, to move everything. And
Absolutely, and I think it is a little bit of a rabbit warren as you come in. It's we've kept on knocking out holes in the walls as we've gone, but it's patched together and it works. Yeah.
And so, taking a few steps back to when we were talking about what technology you first decided to use at your firm. So, you said Action Step, and you had a VoIP phone that was desktop phone. What was your thought process in selecting those, and why did you select those? Because back in the day, I feel like cloud systems still weren't that popular 10 years ago.
It wasn't as common back then. I think we wanted to go. Cost was a factor as well. We didn't have the money to invest in big servers and big PBX phone systems and all that type of thing. But we also wanted to go much more nimble and be much more light in how we approached things so that we weren't tied to old mainframe servers and paper files and all that type of thing. It did evolve as we went. As we got to 8, 9, 10 staff, I think our Dropbox setup for sharing files didn't really work anymore. So then we integrated with NetDocuments. So we run NetDocuments and Action Step for file management and practice management. Our phone system did serve us pretty well during 2020. I've heard lots of stories about law firms shutting their doors and having to somehow still keep phones answered when they were all tied to the main office. So we had all our staff went home and plugged all their phones in. We had reception was being answered from a living room in a suburb down the road, and we all just had calls routed through to us, and it worked really well. The system was breaking down as we got larger, so we moved over to Microsoft Teams with our phone system. That ended up being quite a disaster of a move from a reliability, and there were some benefits because it was all located on our laptops, much more seamless that way, but reliability, calls dropping, with the size of team we had, it wasn't working for us. We spent so much time, our tech guys, with the Microsoft engineers, and in the end, we came across to VXT, which is a purpose-built for law firms, and it integrates beautifully with Action Step for us. File notes save across, calls come through. We can see who's calling already, so the client contact details come in, and the reliability is there. So the team has been really excited to have that piece of the puzzle. But really, those are our three main sort of pieces of our software puzzle these days that we run with.
That's awesome. And so Action Step, is that something you think as you grow more that you think you will keep with?
It's scaled really well for us. Like it's a product that has worked as a small firm, and then now, approaching 50, it still works really well. We do a lot of different types of billing around our firm, which it handles. We've got areas where it's fixed fee. We've got areas where you time record. We've got areas where the files are all costed. So there's a real practice mix in how we mechanically make that side of things work. But no, Action Step does a really good job with all of those different things, client management, document generation, all those types of things all scale pretty well. Although I would say it's probably as good as you make it. It's a highly flexible program, highly flexible platform. The more you put into it and the more you develop it and the more you work on getting out of it, the more you actually do get out of it, which is probably like any software product. But this one in particular, Action Step, is a very highly customizable, you can use it with all types of integrations and all the rest of it. So it is what you put into it that you get out of it, really.
Yeah, I guess it's good finding those ones that can be customizable. I think there's you hear of these legacy systems that can't scale and are not customizable at all.
And there's been things along the way where we've been able to speak to developers, and part of our really systematized, efficient workflows that we have in areas where we've been able to build our own plugins for it, and things that have been able to really help as we've scaled. It works well out of the box, but it works even better once you've put a bit into it and built it around what you want to do.
Yeah. Could you share some examples of those things that you've customized in it?
Yeah, one thing that we've just set up and we're still in the testing phase is with sitting down with the team. How can we make our victims of crime work more? There's a high administrative burden with those files. How can we help streamline that administrative side of things and still provide a high level of customer service, but reduce the amount of time that all of our legal assistants spend on the administrative side. And one of the big roadblocks that we found was chasing clients for documents. We need those receipts for the security shutters. We need that quote for that gym membership. And it generally involves emails to the clients. It usually involves follow-up phone calls, all those types of things. And we thought, wouldn't it be awesome if we could get a system that would automatically text the client and just say, hey, just a reminder, we're waiting on these items to progress your claim. Please send them through. Here it is. And so we spoke with a developer, and we're just in the rolling out this integration where basically it'll take the client data. We can set it up to send a regular weekly, monthly, whatever it is, just a reminder, we're still chasing this from you. And then they get a little personalized text message, which has come out of Action Step. And hopefully the idea would be that hopefully it can automate some of that. Oh, yep, that's right. I do need to send them those documents, and it'll reduce some of that manual follow-up that we're doing where we're chasing. We just spend all the time trying to make phone calls to chase up documents and not getting them. Things like that, really practical kind of things that can hopefully address bottlenecks in workflows is what we're trying to achieve.
That's awesome. And how do you go about workshopping the idea? Who do you talk to or with at your firm to come up with these ideas and plan it out, map it out?
Yeah, that one came out of sitting down with the admin team. I was actually originally getting into all the AI craze and looking at that side of things. I'm like, oh wow, we could really do a lot of that stuff with that. We could build this awesome system to automate all these different processes, and all of our letters can get automated, and basically everything can get automated, and it's awesome. And we even talked to a developer about a solution that we could set up, and about streamlining common letters and making them common to just send out with AI. And then I sat down with the team, and they were like, actually, that's not the sticking point. Those basic letters, when we did the maths, how much time in a week they'd probably spend on those letters. What's sinking the time is the client follow-up. If we had some system that could actually make that smoother, that would be the thing. So it was actually sitting down with the admin team, and even sitting with some of the juniors as well, and going, what is consuming your day? What is taking the time? And it wasn't the things that I thought it was. So that was actually a real lesson for me, that it's not always the things that we think are going to help. It's actually the people that are doing the actual day-to-day that can often feed it back. So then going back to talk with some of our different providers about and finding the right people to develop these solutions, whether it's Action Step or Net Documents or different developers along the way to work on those things.
And do you think, on the topic of AI, the much spoken about topic, do you think it is, or how do you think it is going to have an impact on how lawyers do their job in the future?
I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to make us a lot more efficient. It's going to mean that we can hopefully provide access to justice for people who might not otherwise have had access. I think it's the type of law that we do where we're able to do things efficiently, and so there's a business case for being able to help more people. I think hopefully we can become more efficient, automate more of that back end, so that we can focus more on the people side and really, continue that business case to help people even that we can't currently help would be awesome. I think it's only a good thing if we can automate more of those back-end tasks. I think it's going to, in people law, I think you always need people to be able to work with people. I'm not one of those that's terrified of being made redundant yet. Maybe it will happen one day, but I think at the moment, in the short to medium term, I'm excited about the prospects for it to be able to really streamline what we do.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the space of AI and access to justice, and how people might be able to help themselves without even going to a lawyer with the help of AI. But I think it's such like an unknown territory, the space of these AI language models. If you're putting information in it, people don't understand it well enough now to be able to have something that's secure for things that is personal information.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of issues around it at the moment. I think I like to say that I like to be on the cutting edge of technology, not the bleeding edge. And I think we're still probably on the bleeding edge at this stage. I don't want to be the last adopter. I don't want to necessarily be one of the first adopters either. So I think there's huge merit for it and a lot of awesome possibilities for it over the next year or two. And yeah, definitely that's a big part of what I do these days, is trying to keep across those developments and make sure that we don't get left behind with it as well.
Nice. And being a fast adopter of technology, is there any anecdotes of how this has enhanced client experience at your firm?
Look, I'd like to say it probably isn't obvious to the clients necessarily. I think it's more makes the lawyers and assistants' jobs easier so that they can provide much more personalized service. And the client probably doesn't actually notice that side of it in many respects. I think if technology is doing its job, you don't really notice it. So probably can't point to direct things where the client has gone, wow, that technology is fantastic. It's made my client experience so much better. I think it's made the back end so much better, and it's meant that the lawyers have been able to be that much more efficient. We were able to, one of our criminal lawyers who's off in court all day, every day, got him a new laptop that has a little flip tablet screen, and he can take his phone calls on VXT while he's sitting in a corner at court. He can sit there and smash out stuff that when he had his big clunky laptop, he wouldn't have done. Client doesn't really notice that, but on his side, he can get twice as much done in a day, and he's working on a fixed fee kind of billing model, so he can actually help that many more clients and actually have that much more output, and which brings down costs for the client as well. So, yeah.
And when selecting some of these technologies for your phone system, for example, what are some of the key things that you had to consider when deciding what phone system to go for, or perhaps what practice management system to go for?
I think the more for the end user, for our lawyers and assistants, we want it to be streamlined, easy to use, ideally fully integrated. There's nothing worse than having 10 different portals to log into every day. You want to have one or two, maybe three things that they have to juggle from a software side of things. You want to keep it really streamlined. Yes, we have a tech savvy team, but you can't count on that. You want to have it so that everybody can use it. And so, yes, so reliability, integration where it can all work together, and user friendliness. I think those are top things that we look for when we're trying to figure out our technology stack. Absolutely. And these days, more than ever, security as well. We've been putting a lot into the cybersecurity side of things, making sure that our systems are secure, all of that side of things. That's now that we're all data, electronic, no paper files, that becomes the next big thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully that's not a scary future. And so when it comes to implementing these technologies, once you've selected them, how do you, in a large firm, 45 people, how do you roll out a new technology and go about implementing it? I feel like it'd be quite a big change having to cut off your phones and switch over all at once. How did that happen?
Absolutely. Look, there's managing those transitions. I know we've got our cybersecurity consultant at the moment has all of our staff moving over to using password managers, so that much more secure than keeping all your passwords all over the place, and you can have secure ones. That's been a challenge to try to get 45 staff who've never used these before to actually use the program. So some of that is putting it out there, sending emails, tutorials, and then having Josh in our office being able to run around the office and sit with people, get them initiated in the different products. Different software like VXT was very good at having training sessions with staff. We'd have grouped them up in, this is what's coming, this is how it's going to look on Wednesday. You're not going to be answering phones in Teams. They're going to answer on this new piece of software, and this is how it's going to look. And look, that change happens whether they're ready for it or not. But no, we try to prep them up so that they're ready for it. And then when it happens, just try to smooth it and deal with, make the tweaks and try to hear the feedback. I guess that's the key. And it's harder and harder the more you have teams and structures. You get more and more removed from the day-to-day. So it's trying to find ways to keep hearing those little niggly problems that people have and going back and trying to get them fixed and resolved.
Has there ever been anything you have implemented, but you've just had bad feedback with that loop that you've just spoke of?
Sometimes I'm the last one to hear about it. I hear that with Microsoft Teams, everybody's been having problems with calls crashing. Nobody's calls aren't going through, and it takes a while to go, how serious is this problem? And so with Teams, we were with them, I don't know, it was probably only about a year, but there was enough time in there to figure out, try to find solutions, couldn't get solutions. And so that was one rollout that was short-lived, and we had to, all right, let's find another solution that's actually going to work because it's not working for everybody.
Yeah. And so looking ahead now, what excites you the most about the future of your firm? And is there any challenges that you anticipate you'll have to tackle with the continuing to grow stage?
Look, I'd like to say that we're growing the same and we're consolidating. I think everybody around the firm laughs when I say consolidating, because I think probably before 30th of June, we'll probably have brought on 10 people this calendar year already. So it's relative, I guess, slowing that growth. I think the bigger we get as a firm, we're very aware of trying to keep genuine to our roots. You know, typically in the early days when it was just, well, 2 of us and then 4 or 5 of us squashed in an office, we were a really tight-knit group. Now we're a tight-knit group, but within practice groups, because, you can't know 45, 50 people really, really well necessarily. So it's really trying to keep that camaraderie and that really positive culture as we grow. We don't want to become just another big business where you lose that people, yes, it's people focused externally, but people internally. Keeping that great place to work is kind of key. We don't want to just become a big stale corporate and just another company. So that's probably one of the big things as we grow, keeping that quality and that reputation, I guess. As we always say, we're only one stuff up on a file away from, losing that reputation. You got to keep that every file. You got to keep that high level of service and that high level of attention to detail in every file. You can't let it slip. Keeping that training, keeping that quality control, and that team atmosphere. I think those are the kind of the key things moving forward that we want to maintain. Absolutely.
You just have to hope that the office spaces next to you people keep moving out.
Somebody did just move out last week, so we're in the process of another building permit. So it's a constant cycle.
And a bit of a fun question. If you could implement any cutting-edge technology or software solution in your firm tomorrow, without all of the implementation and all the planning, what would it be, and how do you envision it would transform your practice?
That's fascinating, because I feel like we've got some awesome technologies in place. Yeah. Look, I'd probably some days humorously say a software that can deal with some of the difficult clients for you, the ones that call in when they're cranky. It would be nice to have software that could just deal with that. But that's the people side of law, I guess. You can't always, sometimes with people, you've got to deal with the people side. Look, I think with AI developing, there's so much administration work that can just our team spend. I think we used to hire a person to stand over the photocopier each day, just copying off archive boxes full of medical records and all the rest of it. And that's no longer a thing. I'd love it in 5 years' time if so much of the rote preparation of basic correspondence and all these different types of things that we now have people doing, if those people can then be moving up again to doing the next level of more complicated work, and we can just keep shifting things up, I think would be awesome.
Yeah, and I think we'll get there.
I think so. I think it keeps moving.
Yeah. So reflecting on your own career path, what's one decision that you have made that you're particularly proud of, and why?
I think taking the step with Paul in the early days to go and set up our own firm was a terrifying decision at the time. I think I tell the story about how my wife and I had found out we were expecting just before we gave notice at our last workplace, And while we were serving out our notice period, we found out it was twins. So that was exciting, setting up a brand new business with I should say, doing it with very little financial resources to start off with, a growing family. It was a terrifying time, but I think looking back now, it's something we're really proud of. It's really turned into something awesome. We have, I think what we love most about it is the really tight-knit community. We've got people that look out for each other. We've got an awesome team, and everybody's there because they want to be, and they're all looking out for each other. And I think that community that we've been able to build, yes, we're able to help clients and we're able to get some awesome outcomes for people in our professional side of things, but we've also got a really awesome community and team. And I think that's something that I'm particularly proud of.
Have there been any memorable or unexpected moments in your journey in law?
I think we say every day at the office we really should film a sitcom, because there's crazy, there's crazy stuff every day when you have 45 people in an office and you're dealing with people in people law. So it's really hard to put a finger on any one. But I think there's some really gratifying moments. I know my best moments in working in victims of crime, where I remember one particular hearing where I was trying to get some victims of crime assistance for a sexual assault victim. Hadn't been police charges. There wasn't enough beyond reasonable doubt for them to authorize a brief of evidence. So we were running effectively a mini hearing in the magistrate's court to try to prove that what had happened on the balance of probabilities. It's a different standard of the burden of evidence. And we spent all day getting evidence, direct cross-examination of my client, all the rest of it. It was pretty intense day. And then at the end of the day, the magistrate said to the client, look, I'm making a finding that you've been the victim of what you've alleged. And on behalf of the state of Victoria, I extend the state's sympathies and condolences for what's happened. It shouldn't have happened to you. And then he went on to make some financial awards. But by this point, she was just sobbing. And we went out of the courtroom, and she just kept repeating, he believed me. And it was just a huge point as part of her journey of trying to recover from what happened. And stories like that, being able to be there and be part of, that's just, that's what makes me love practicing law. There's some awesome things like that where you can actually be there at people's most difficult moments in life and actually help them in picking up the pieces. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I guess that's why so many people go into law in the first place, to be able to make that real human impact.
Absolutely. And look, I know so many go into law idealistic, they're going to change the world and do all that. And I'm really lucky that I'm being able to practice in an area where I feel like I've been able to do some awesome stuff that way. That's not to say there's many days of just where you're just working files and you don't see see that side of it. But when you are able to, it's really awesome.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for people maybe at the start of their careers now, so they can get as much out of their career as they can?
Yeah, look, I do have a lot of coffees with law students at the law student end, and certainly at the law student end, I'd be saying get experience, get out there. Had never done victims of crime until I practicing. I didn't even know it existed. Get out there, see what's out there, see what you enjoy doing. Also, just get out in the real world, get a job at Kmart, get a job at Coles. It's so much, look, it might be different at the big tier firms. I have never looked at an applicant's resume to see what their grades were. They've got a law degree, that's great. I'm much more interested in what their life experiences have been and how they're going to, what their work ethic's like and how they would fit in with the team. And so get experience, get out there, interact with people and get some real world exposure. And I think once you get into law, somebody very wise told me early on, don't take a job if you can help it just for the money. Take a job for the experience and what you can learn from that job. Look, the money comes, that stuff comes as you progress your career, but don't take a job because of it. if you have the luxury of it, try to take a job that you'll enjoy and find fulfillment in and that you can learn from. If you can do that, money comes, money follows, that's fine. But if you can take that early in your career, you'll, I think, last a lot longer in the career of law than if you chase the bright, sparkly financial side of things straight off.
Yeah, and you want to be enjoying your life, don't you?
Absolutely. We spend a lot of time at work, and if you can get fulfillment and enjoyment out of what you do, it's so much better. So as I always say, we're really lucky that we can. Probably 99% of the world's population goes to work because they have to and they need to put food on the table, and that's absolutely fair and needs to happen. And we're really lucky that we have that luxury of often being able to choose a career that we can actually get fulfillment from. So I do know I'm incredibly lucky on that side of things, but that would be my advice. If you have that luxury, try to make your career decisions based on what would get you that fulfillment, get you those experiences, and develop you as a person, as a lawyer.
Yeah, I love it. So thank you so much for joining me, Joshua. I loved chatting with you today. And if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. They can email me at joshua@johnstonreimer.com.au or visit website johnstonreimer.com.au. Always happy to chat. Law students I'm always happy to have a coffee with or otherwise have a chat with. But happy if people want to touch base on any of the types of things that we've talked about as well. It's been great, Sophie. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of File Notes. To keep up with the latest episodes and content, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at File Notes Podcast. You can also visit us on our website at vxt.co.nz/podcast/file notes to subscribe to our email list and never miss an episode. That's vxt.co.nz/podcasts/file notes. See you there.